Jacinda Ardern there with the shocking news. She's announcing there she is resigning as the New Zealand Prime Minister, with her Labor Party to hold a vote this Sunday to elect a new leader. New Zealand will then go to an election on October 14th of this year. Jacinda Ardern, as you heard there, saying she doesn't have enough in the tank for another 4 years. She has had a long career in politics. She joined the Labor Party at the age of 17, started working in politics as a researcher for the former Prime Minister Helen Clark. She's had 15 years in Parliament, 6 years as Prime Minister. She'll now leave the Parliament altogether in April. Her resignation does come at a time when New Zealand, like many countries, faces some economic headwinds this year. But as we heard Jacinda Ardern saying there, she's not leaving because it's getting hard. She says she's leaving because she knows that she's not the right person to lead the country anymore. She pointed out a few times there she's only human. She says she's given it her all for as long as she could, but now wants to finally get married and spend some more time with her young child who's starting school this year. Let's bring in my colleague Laura Jays now for some reflections on Jacinda Ardern's big news today. Laura, Jacinda Ardern has been hugely popular and was for a long time, although that has waned recently. Her election 6 years ago, we all remember it, it made headlines globally. She was really seen as a fresh young female Prime Minister who is going to be this breath of fresh air on the international stage. We all remember the Jacinda mania. She always had a certain star power, and now we're going to be talking about her legacy.
Yeah, that's right. She's tired, and who could blame her? She has been in the role for almost 6 years. She was seeking a third term. She confirmed in November of last year that she would be seeking a third term, but obviously over the Christmas break she's had to think about that and she's decided against it. She says she knows that she's not the best person to lead the Labor Party in New Zealand going forward. And look, fair enough. Not many politicians make decisions like this and take these kind of decisions into their own hands, but that's certainly what she has done. As you say, Ash, she's been hugely popular. She was certainly a feminist figure when she became Prime Minister, but you know there were certainly inflection points in which she brandished those credentials throughout her Prime Ministership as well. But she's not going forward. And look, I think we have to take her reasons at face value, not forgetting that she was, you know, a trailblazer as well, having a baby whilst in office. I mean, having a baby, going back to work, being a working mother is pretty hard at the best of times. Doing when you're the Prime Minister of a country is pretty tough too. But Ash, you have to look at the last 5 or 6 years. It's been pretty tough for her, and I think there's a COVID legacy here as well. Any Prime Minister who has led their country through COVID, and that was a really trying time. Not only would she be tired and exhausted from that, the relentlessness of it, but also her popularity, frankly, in New Zealand is waning. The New Zealand economy is not looking great at the moment. Inflation is much higher there than in Australia. Interest rates getting higher and higher. So the economy is becoming that big focus. We need to talk about some of her legacy issues as well. That shocking murder in the mosque is one of those things that would have been a very difficult day in her Prime Ministership, but she was decisive. She changed gun laws in New Zealand pretty swiftly after that. So she has made all these decisions, and look, you've got to say she's absolutely a darling of the left. Conservative voters don't like her at all. So to see who is her successor, filling her shoes will be very difficult, but to change that conversation, maybe a more centrist leader from the Labor Party, I'm not sure of the credentials of the candidates there, but I think whoever the Labor Party in New Zealand do elect to take them to this election in October, they can't be Jacinda Ardern light, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And when you look at some of the recent polls, there was a big one done in December, and that was certainly suggesting that her popularity was continuing to wane. She recorded her lowest preferred Prime Minister ranking that she'd had since she became Labor leader. It was at about 29%. This was a One News Kantar poll, and it also showed that the opposition, National and ACT, they had a clear majority. This poll was suggesting that they would be able to govern alone. So National was sitting at about 38%, Labor was on 33%, and that had just been steadily dropping in the previous months. So it certainly does look like those economic problems that you're alluding to there, projections of a recession. We've been reporting, of course, inflation issues right around the world, but New Zealand in particular has had very high inflation. You mentioned some of the more horrible times of her prime ministership with the mosque situation. Crime more generally has been a really big problem in New Zealand as well, and that's been on the rise and causing a lot of angst as well in terms of the news commentary there. So I think you're right, Laura, we're looking at a new era for New Zealanders, and they'll get to decide in October.
Yeah, they certainly will, and they'll want to certainly see who the contenders are. So, look, the election campaign in many ways will start now for New Zealanders. It's a long run up to October, but when you have a new leader, I think it'll be a baptism of fire for Jacinda Ardern, for whoever takes over from Jacinda Ardern. And of course, now there's going to be more focus on the current opposition. So this is an opportunity for the Conservative side of politics, no doubt. But the other thing to point out is that there is certainly a COVID hangover here. If you look at, our elections here in Australia, look at the federal election, but it's also some of the state elections, there's not one narrative. You can't say, Scott Morrison lost the election because people were sick of seeing him through COVID. But I certainly think with their zero COVID policy for so long in New Zealand, living under lockdowns, that would certainly have played into her waning popularity there in New Zealand. Look, I remember talking to Charlotte Bellis at a time. She was a reporter in Afghanistan at the collapse or when, coalition forces were brought out. She was pregnant and she couldn't get home to New Zealand. So that was one of the darker moments in Jacinda Ardern's prime ministership. The fact that no exceptions were made, even for a woman like Charlotte Bellis, risking her life as a reporter, now pregnant, couldn't even come home to deliver her baby safely in New Zealand. Now, that was all sorted out in the end, but there were times that she was just inflexible during her prime ministership. So, look, no prime ministerships are perfect. There'll be much said about her legacy. As I said before, she is a feminist. She has got on and done things rather than said things, and she's certainly led by example. She's not everyone's cup of tea, but certainly for her supporters, she was for a very long time.